The travel there, who paid for it? How does that work?
That's a great question. So any county trip as a supervisor that I want to take, there's a process you go through. I started because it was the very first trip I had taken that wasn't on a committee or something that wasn't already pre-planned or scheduled or arranged for me from the CAO's office. I just went and said, hey, this is a trip I want to take. Here's the agenda. Here's the things I want to do. Is this county approved? And they said, absolutely. Got to keep receipts. And I went through that process. So I turned in normal receipts, and it's very common. I mean, anytime that a county employee wants to travel for approved travel, it's a lot more common than I even thought since coming back from the trip, because I had no idea how that worked. So yeah, I mean, it's really normal. I mean, yeah, I mean, and I learned a lot in the process, actually, about.
Yeah, learning experience.
Well, I'm not talking about just the topic, but I'm talking about just county travel and how that works. What's interesting is how lean I did it, and then in some ways, you know, like flying out of Reading last minute is very expensive. So then you look at driving to Sacramento, and then I flew Southwest as an example, because I fly Southwest quite a bit. So I saved the county quite a bit of money by driving down there, going Southwest, but then because there's flight miles, that gets deducted from what I'm paid, because there can be no benefit, no benefit to the individual employee, which I totally agree with. So I could have flown out of Reading and spent quite a bit more money and got full reimbursement, but because I was trying to save the county money and do it that way, I wound up having to wound up not getting reimbursed everything. But that's okay. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it's not the end of the world. It's a learning experience. So
who approves it?
Well, ultimately, Nolda Short, the auditor, approves the reimbursements. But
I mean, who approves that you can go on the trip? This seems like legitimate county business.
You know what? Ultimately, that's a great question. I went to county council and then our CAO and asked, this is a trip I want to take. These are the things I want to cover. How does this work? Because you know, I was pretty determined to go either way, because there's some answers that are best in person. And there's a lot of trips I've taken actually in the last, let's say, 6 or 7 months, that if I go on them, and I'll go on them as a county employee, like when I go to like the Other Side Academy, which I very, very much believe is what's needed in Shasta County for the unsheltered, unhoused individuals. I want to bring that to Shasta County, and I'll have to probably take a delegation of some kind, community people and different individuals. So that'll be something that, now that I've gone through this process once, I'm going to make sure when we go to Denver or Utah, whichever one we decide to go to, it'll probably be the Utah campus. I'll have to take maybe somebody from Public Works, maybe somebody from HHSA, and then maybe I'll probably reach out to some people for the city of Reading and see if they want to go as well. But
that's a whole nother story.
That's a whole other story. But again, when it comes to travel, and it comes to that process, you know, I'm learning that.
Okay. So what happened with Mike Lindell? What did you do when you were there? What kind of response did you get?
Yeah. So just to back up, this whole process for me has been about learning. There's only so much you can really read online and research in terms of videos, because everything seems to be so slanted. And so one thing I'll say is Kathy's office, our clerk, she's been phenomenal. I mean, I've spent a lot of time with her and Joanna, and I did that actually during my campaign, and then of course the last month of the election, just learning about the process, because I knew if and when I won that this would be a topic, because knocking on doors, it was very split. It wasn't one way or the other, but it was one thing that constantly came up, was about voter trust, people being disenfranchised, having nothing to do with the process, even just with politics in general. So I just didn't realize it would come up this fast. But it was something I wanted to address, and I'm not an expert in any of that. So as I tried to reach out to different legislative bodies, attorneys, different people across the state, it was really tough to get calls back. So I just basically threw a Hail Mary and said, look, I know there's an individual, Mike Lindell, who obviously is in this, when I say in this group, I mean, he obviously, I guess, is some kind of de facto hot button topic, or I don't even want to say leader. It's just someone that's very loud about it. So I went back there and I was able to meet with a bunch of different attorneys, had a bunch of different people brought in while I was there in Minnesota, asking questions, getting connected with different people. And face-to-face is always best. I mean, and for me, that's why it was really important. So I learned more information in that 4 or 5 hour meeting than I could have ever done in a month or two of reading and trying to study and listening. Because that's like 5% of the work I'm doing on this. I mean, I'm talking to a lot of different organizations, a lot of different vendors. Of course, there's only 3 or 4 that are approved electronic vendors for California. But talking to, well, I won't say the different individuals from the different organizations, but just doing my homework, spending a lot of time understanding it. And then, but Kathy's office has been, like I said, great. Just helping fill in gaps, asking questions. And we had a meeting this week. We'll have another one here in a few days. And I think there's, like I mentioned at a town hall I did last night, I think there's going to be a lot of positive forward movement on March 28th, and positive for everybody. I think at the end of the day, what everybody wants is just to know that they've been heard and listened to, and then that nobody's disenfranchised, that everybody feels that their vote counts, and everybody has the opportunity to vote freely and confidentially. And that's what's important to me.
So you met with Mike Lindell. That's what I want to know. How did that go? Did he say, yes, I'll back you up? You know, what happened?
Well, originally, so when I had reached out to him literally the day before our board meeting, because what I was getting from people was, you're going to get sued, and I'm going down this road of litigation, and I'm just like, geez, like I don't want to cost the county a ton of money, but I do want to ask questions. I do want to get some answers. I actually want to know what we can and can't do, because I know we're under a time crunch. So what originally came to, would you fund if we had to push back? But really, like, that's not something I'm interested in doing, going down a road where we're suing ourselves or suing the state. What I've learned now is there's processes in place that we can move forward. So in terms of my contact with Mr. Lindell, from a litigious standpoint of backing us financially, like that doesn't even come up. Like, that's not really even so much a thing anymore.
Did you meet with him face to face?
Oh yeah.
What did you talk about?
Well, I mean, we spent a little bit of time at the very beginning just chatting, and I'll tell anybody, if you've never read his book, I actually listened to his book for the entire 9.5 hours on flights, on layovers, after dinner, the day before. So when I flew out there, I think it was on the 6th, my entire travel, like driving to the airport down in Sacramento, and the entire day, 9.5 hours, was listening to his book. He's got one of the most incredible stories you'll ever hear. And it put the politics aside, but the guy has an amazing heart for people that deal with substance abuse, if you don't know his story. And I would just tell people, you should listen or read his book just solely for the purpose of understanding his life and outside of anything political. It's an incredible story for any entrepreneur or person. I mean, he didn't even know the different stations, like what Fox or MSN or CNN, he didn't know any of that stuff 5-6 years ago. And it's an incredible story. But again, I'm not, I wouldn't, I don't know if I'll ever see him again in person or what, but we talked a little bit about that, and then we talked a lot about just the process from a legislative standpoint, about the voting process, what other states are doing, because that's really what I wanted to know. I wanted to know who could I talk to that could tell me, hey, this is what's happening in multiple other states, and had real firsthand knowledge. But I really wasn't just interested in getting his input. I wanted to talk to like attorneys, Secretary of States, other people in other jurisdictions across the country, clerks, and what they do there. And again, I know California's siloed. We do things differently here, but just understanding the whole voting process. And this is something that I really wasn't eager to spend a bunch of time on, but it's something that's before us. It's something that voters do care about. And so that was a great resource. I mean, it was a great resource.
Give me your takeaway from meeting with him.
My takeaway meeting with him was my takeaway with other people I've even spoke to. It's just, there's just a lot of information to pour through, and then it's really getting to the heart of listening to what people want. And I think what people want is they want the opportunity to really feel like their vote's been counted. And I don't expect Joe Blow or Jane Doe to pore over and really research it. I mean, my undergraduate's in social science, so when you're talking about like where does the information come from and then going all the way back to sources that were either there firsthand, et cetera, that's what I've tried to do as best I can. So the outcome from that, I would say, is more coupled with, not coupled, but combined with everything. He's been one piece of learning a lot about the voting process in the country, where we were years ago, where we are today, what sustainable changes we might be able to make here in Shasta County to not disenfranchise anybody, but bring everybody back together. So that was the big takeaway. It was just, it really catapulted, because now there's a lot of other people reaching out to me that, let's just say, might not be politically leaning the same way as Mr. Lindell. And I've welcomed those phone calls, and I've had those conversations. And they've been great.
Plus or minus, how long do you think you met with them?
Oh, not plus or minus. I got there at 8:45, and my flight, I think I left around 1 or 1:15, so 4 or 5 hours.
But actually with him, was it a 5-minute conversation or?
Oh no. He was there the entire time.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
no. There was.
him for
Oh yeah, I was with him for several hours. Yes,
Oh,
yes,
wow.
and he's. Oh yeah, and there was different, like I said, different attorneys, different clerks from different states that were brought in, or just like phone calls, like, hey, we're going to call this person, we're going to call that person. Because ideally, I thought, hey, maybe we do a Zoom, or we just do a phone call. And then when I talked to Kathy Darling about the timeline, that's where it really became like, hey, I need to jump on a plane and go, because I need to like get this process moving. Because the last thing I want to do is slow up the clerk's office for any kind of special elections or other things that are coming, because obviously we have a couple possible elections coming, and I want to make sure we have a voting system in place, and I want to make sure we're covered. And so, like I said, like what we did in 4 or 5 hours, and I've done in the subsequent weeks or couple weeks to follow. I mean, I fast forwarded it by I don't want to say months, but weeks for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Anything else with Mr. Lindell? Are we good?
No, I mean, he's one of the nicest men I've ever met. But again, I boil a lot of things down to just life experiences and how you treat people. And I've met a lot of nice people. And but like I said, if you're a person that really cares about understanding where people could be deep into substance abuse, I mean, like deep into substance abuse, and how they claw their way out or get their way out. And I'm not saying his way is the way everybody should do it, but it's pretty remarkable. And that was probably wasn't the takeaway that what mattered the most to me. What mattered the most to me was I got the information I needed to bring back to Shasta County to make the voting process smoother and better for everybody. But that was a great secondary thing, was just meeting somebody who's really, it's been an overcomer. And I think that's what Shasta County is. I think Shasta County, we're a community of overcomers, and we can get knocked down, but we can get back up. And we've proved that multiple times.
Okay, the meeting last night, how did that go? What was covered?
So the town hall last night was great. It was really an opportunity for me just to listen to voters. It was really cool in some ways. Well, in a lot of ways it was really cool, but some of the people I remember knocking on their doors. And I would say some that voted for me and some that did not. And we had a great discussion. So listening to people is really what that was about. So at the board meeting, obviously there's public comment. There's not a lot of discourse. This was that opportunity. And I'll definitely do it again. There's no doubt. I'll do it again.
Did anything in particular strike you, rise to the top as their concerns or whatever?
There was definitely one of the very first questions was about Dominion voting machines, and I made the joke, I didn't think that was going to come up, and people, I think everybody really laughed pretty hard at that, but that was a concern. We talked a little bit about the CEO appointment. I couldn't go into detail much about that because that's an HR thing that we're still in process of. We talked quite a bit about youth services and HHSA or departments within in terms of homeless, unsheltered, etc. So it was a lot of great dialogue, and it's on my Facebook page. We streamed it; it's there. I had a great little security team made up of a couple individuals that I was really thankful that they stepped up and volunteered, and it was peaceful. We had a couple people blurred out, but and that won't happen probably again. So I'm looking forward to keeping the conversations going.